Okay, dear students, I am again here with you and I'm sorry for the inconvenience. In fact, it was a technical problem. Anyway, let's come to our business. Do you remember what we are talking about the previous day? Do you have any uh, ideas what we talked about the previous day? Okay, perhaps you can remember we did talk about different kinds of sentences based on structure, and we talked that in English there are three kinds of sentences, mainly three kinds of sentences based on structure, and they are simple, complex, compound. And we also talked how a simple sentence is composed, how a complex sentence is composed, how a compound sentence is composed. That is, we know the main features, grammatical characteristics to be simple sentence, complex sentence, and compound sentence. And we know in a simple sentence there is one clause, and that is an independent clause. In a complex sentence, at least there are two clauses. One is principal clause, the other is subordinate clause. And in a compound sentence, at least there are two clauses, and the two clauses are two principal clauses. We know up to this. Today, we will see how the structures of simple, complex, and compound are used in the practice of completing sentences. In your question paper, if you analyze previous questions, that is board questions, what you will see that most of the times complex sentences are given, and sometimes simple sentences are given, and even sometimes proverbial sentences are given. So in doing it, that is, in practicing completing sentences, sometimes you may face an incomplete simple sentence. Sometimes you may find an incomplete complex sentence, or sometimes you may find an incomplete compound sentence, or even you may find an incomplete proverbial sentence. Anyway, today we will talk how we will complete complex sentences, that is, incomplete complex sentences. In a complex sentence there are two clauses. One is principal clause, the other is subordinate clause. Normally one clause will be given, you have to write the other clause. One clause will be given, you have to write the other clause. So, and also we know that in a complex sentence, to connect two clauses, that is the principal clause and the subordinate clause, some subordinate conjunctions, or sometimes called subordinators, that is, some subordinate conjunctions, for example, before, after, since, for, as, because, if, though, although, till, until, so that, unless. All these subordinate conjunctions are used in writing complex sentences. Look at this sentence. Hassan cannot walk since he has got injured. Look at this sentence. This is an example of a complex sentence. Hassan cannot walk. On clause, the other is he has got injured. So, this one is principal clause, the other one is subordinate clause. What is this? This is a subordinate conjunction. This conjunction, what is the function of a conjunction? We know the function of a conjunction is to connect two clauses. Conjunctions used in compound sentences as well as complex sentences. The conjunctions that are used in compound sentences are not used in complex sentences, and the conjunctions that are used in complex sentences are not used in compound sentences. It means that looking at the conjunctions, you can identify whether the sentence is a complex sentence or a compound sentence. Look at this. Hassan has got injured and he cannot walk. This is a compound sentence. The first one is an example of complex sentence. The second one is an example of a complex sentence. Sorry, the first one is an example of complex sentence. The second one is an example of compound sentence. How do you understand this? Structurally, if this conjunction and indicates that definitely this is a compound sentence, and this very conjunction indicates that this is a complex sentence. So, there are some conjunctions that indicate that sentences where the conjunctions have been used are definitely complex sentences. So, in completing sentences, what happens? I have already mentioned that on clause will be given and the other clause should be written. But what type of clause it will be? If you see, for example, if it's written like this is an incomplete sentence, you know. If it's given here, the sense indicates that the sentence should be a complex sentence. But if it is written and it is given here, you have to complete this sentence. You have to first think that and as and is given, there is on clause, it is a principal clause and there is an and. It indicates that the following clause should be another principal clause. And one principal clause here and another is here. Between the two principal clauses there is and. It means it will be a compound sentence. But what happens? What do you see here? It says, look at the first clause. The first clause is a principal clause. And there is since. And we have already known that since is used in complex sentence. Or in another way, we can say that there are some conjunctions that are always used with subordinate clauses. The conjunction as if, since, so that, as if, as though, till, until, so that, because, all these conjunctions are used with subordinate clauses. Let's write this. Look at the board. As if, since, because, though, although, till, until, so that, if, unless, as long as, so long as, when, where, how, who, whom, whose, that. Look at this. I'm reading. Read with me. As if, since, because, though, although, till, until, so that, if, unless, as long as, so long as, when, not when. The sound is when, where, how, who, whom, whose, that, which. All these conjunctions are used in complex sentences. In other words, if you see in your question, if you see in a sentence, as if, as though, since, because, etc., all these conjunctions, if you find any of these conjunctions in your practice, in your question, then you have to understand that the sentence should be a complex sentence. And the clause that follows these conjunctions should be subordinate clause. I am repeating. All these conjunctions that I have already written on the board are used in writing complex sentences. In your question, the sentences will be incomplete sentences. In this case, if you find these words or phrases as conjunctions in your sentence, it means that the sentences you are going to write should be in complex form. That means the clauses that follow these conjunctions should be dependent clauses, that is subordinate clauses. And the clauses preceding these conjunctions should be independent clauses. I am giving one example with the use of simple or I am using. Today we'll talk about these two, though, although. I'm writing a sentence. Although he lives in England, he cannot speak English. Look at this example. How many clauses are there? 1, 2. Although he lives in England, on clause the other is he cannot speak English. Okay. I have already mentioned the conjunction. The conjunctions are used with subordinate clauses. It means that although is a conjunction, and the following clause, he lives in England, is a subordinate clause. And we know that if in a sentence there is a subordinate clause, this is a complex sentence. So definitely we can tell this is a complex sentence. So if it is a complex sentence and if the subordinate clause is written here, the other clause should be principal clause. And he cannot speak English is a principal clause. See, in completing sentence, what happens? One clause is usually given, the other clause should be written. If it's given here, now complete this sentence. Although he lives in England, it means that, look at this conjunction, although. This very conjunction, although, indicates that you have to write a complex sentence. And in writing a complex sentence, you need two clauses, on principal clause, on subordinate clause. And the subordinate clause is already given. It means that you have to write the principal clause. So in completing sentence, normally what happens, the one clause is given, the other clause should be written. But how to write, how you will write, how you will decide what kind of clause it will be. First you have to identify what kind of sentence you are going to write. And the very clause or the very words or phrase given in the question will indicate you what kind of sentence you have to write. Here, for example, we see although indicates that you have to write a complex sentence, and the following clause indicates that is, the clause with although indicates that it will be a complex sentence, then you need to write a principal clause. But I can show one more example. Look at this. Okay. The students always get good marks. I have written a sentence and this. You have to complete this sentence. The students always get good marks because. Look at this sentence, the incomplete sentence. What is here? There is on clause, the students always get good marks. What kind of clause it is, do you think? This is a principal clause. The students always get good marks. But at the same time, look at here, there is because. And we know because is used in complex sentence. And the clause that comes after because is always a dependent clause. Then what does it mean that as principal clause is given and there is conjunction there because, it means that you have to write a subordinate clause. And what kind of subordinate clause it can be? Based on the sense of the previous principal clause, we can write a subordinate clause. The students always get good marks because, what because? Why students get good marks? Because they study regularly and attend classes every day. For example, I have written the students always get good marks because they study regularly and attend classes every day. So this clause, they study regularly, because they study regularly and attend classes, is a subordinate clause. So what we have understood? We have understood that in writing sentences, we have to be very careful. That is, the clause given and the conjunction given in the incomplete sentence are very important. So first we have to look at the part of the sentence given in question. You have to analyze what kind of clause is given in the question and what kind of conjunction is given in the question. Based on the conjunction given and based on the clause given in the question, you have to write the other clause or other phrase. So this is very important. This is the fundamental. These are the fundamental points of doing completing sentences. Next day, we will see the uses of different subordinating conjunctions and how they are used in complex sentences. And we always know every conjunction has every conjunction maintains a relation between the principal clause and the subordinate clause. Next we will find out what kind of relation that very conjunction creates between the principal clause and the subordinate clause. And we also know there is a semantic relationship between the principal clause and subordinate clause in complex sentences, as well as there is a relation of tense between the principal clause and subordinate clause based on the conjunctions used in complex sentences. We will examine all these, especially these 2 points, in the next classes. That is, relation of tense between principal clause and subordinate clause in complex sentences, and the semantic, that is, relation of meaning between the principal clause and the subordinate clause in complex sentences in next classes. Till then, thank you very much. Hope to meet you again. And I think you have understood some points of doing completing sentences. Are you sure?